The day began with a soft breeze brushing over the quiet harbor while Amir prepared his diving gear with great care because he believed the ocean should always be respected. He checked every strap and every piece of equipment slowly, making sure nothing would disturb the peaceful world beneath the water. Amir was known in the small coastal town as a calm diver who never rushed and always returned with stories that held both wonder and mystery. The fishermen nearby often greeted him with warm smiles, but today they carried a strange expression because they had seen something unusual in the deep water, a large metal shadow that did not look like any shipwreck. They asked Amir to explore it because he was the only one brave enough to go into places no one else dared. Amir agreed with a steady nod because the ocean had always called him toward its secrets, and today seemed no different, yet deep inside he sensed that something was waiting for him. As he stepped onto the wooden dock, the sun reflected on the surface of the sea like a sheet of moving glass. Amir felt a strange excitement rising in his chest because unusual finds often led to stories that stayed in his memory for years. He placed his oxygen tank on his back, secured his mask, and moved toward the edge of the dock with slow, measured breaths. The water below looked calm, but Amir knew that the deeper layers of the ocean always held shadows that could surprise even the most skilled diver. He took one final glance at the open sky, then leaned forward and dropped into the water, letting the cool waves surround him completely. The world above faded away as he sank deeper and deeper, guided only by the steady sound of his own breathing. The first layer of the ocean was bright with drifting fish and warm rays of sunlight, but as Amir continued downward the water grew darker and colder. He moved like a gentle shadow through the quiet blue world, with each motion slow and careful. He passed old rocks covered in moss, tall plants rising from the sand, and small sea creatures hiding in tiny caves. Everything seemed normal until a wide flat shape appeared in the distance like something sleeping under a blanket of sand. Amir slowed down and narrowed his eyes because the shape looked too smooth, too straight, and too unnatural to be part of the ocean floor. As he came closer he realized that it was made of metal covered in rust and wrapped in layers of seaweed. Amir focused his torch toward the object, and he felt his heart skip a beat because the structure looked like a train wagon lying sideways at the bottom of the sea. It had wheels partially buried in sand and windows darkened by time and water. The ocean had transformed it into a ghostly relic, yet something about the wagon still looked strong and strangely untouched. Amir circled around it slowly, feeling a mix of confusion and awe because trains did not belong in the ocean and there were no tracks anywhere near this coast. He wondered how this enormous piece of land machinery had ended up here without breaking apart. The wagon seemed mysteriously whole, as if it had simply been placed there intentionally. He hovered near one of the windows and brushed the sand away with his hand. The glass was cracked but still holding together, which was surprising after so many years underwater. Amir tried to look inside, but the darkness kept everything hidden. He moved along the side searching for a clue when he noticed a section of metal bent inward near the roof, almost like something large had struck it. This opening might allow him to enter the wagon, but Amir hesitated because he knew enclosed spaces underwater could be dangerous. Still, the curiosity inside him kept growing stronger, and he felt that turning back now would leave him with a heavy regret. He positioned himself near the opening and took a deep, slow breath, allowing the calmness of the sea to steady his mind. Then he slipped inside carefully, using his torch to guide the way. The interior of the wagon felt colder, and the silence inside was heavy like a held breath. As the beam of light cut through the darkness, Amir finally saw what was hidden within the strange cabin. Rows of seats lined both sides, still attached to the floor, but covered in a thin layer of sea dust. Some seats were broken and hanging loosely, while others looked untouched, almost new. The ceiling had old fans and lights that no longer worked, yet strangely they had not rusted completely. Amir moved deeper into the wagon, taking slow, measured breaths and watching every corner because he did not want to disturb anything. He pointed his light toward the floor and noticed something that made him pause. Near the corner lay a wooden box sealed tightly with carvings running across the lid. The carvings did not look like random scratches because they were smooth and repeated in a pattern, almost like symbols. Amir reached down, touching the surface, and felt that the wood was dry, which shocked him because nothing wooden stayed dry underwater unless it was protected by something unusual. He looked around and saw more of these wooden boxes placed under the seats and some stacked neatly near the front door, as if someone had hidden them on purpose. Each box had the same carved symbols and each seemed untouched by water. This discovery made Amir's curiosity rise even more because nothing about this wagon matched the normal rules of the sea. He wondered if the train wagon had been carrying something important, something people wanted to protect, something that should not have disappeared into the ocean. As he stood there surrounded by silent seats and mysterious boxes, he felt a strange chill run through him, not of fear, but of anticipation. The ocean often hid simple objects, old pottery pieces or sunken boats, but this discovery felt different, like it carried a story that had been waiting for someone patient enough to find it. Amir knew that whatever lay inside these boxes would reveal why this wagon was here, and what secret it had carried before sinking into the deep water. His torch flickered as if urging him to go on, and he realized his journey into this forgotten world had only just begun. Inside the silent train wagon, Amir held his torch steady while trying to understand the strange boxes that appeared untouched by years of water, because the sight made no sense to him. He had seen many wrecks in his life, and every wooden object he had found before was always broken, swollen, or covered in sea layers, yet these boxes looked preserved, almost protected by something unseen. As he floated deeper inside the wagon, he felt a growing tension, like the place was holding its breath, waiting for him to discover something important. Amir carefully moved toward the first box and lifted it into his hands, feeling its unexpected lightness. The carvings on its surface felt warm even through his diving gloves, and this confused him because wood underwater always lost its natural warmth. Amir turned the box slowly in his hands, studying each carved symbol. None of them resembled any language he knew. They were not from old sailors' markings, not from coastal tribes, and not from any museum collection he had studied in books. Their curves and lines flowed like rivers meeting in perfect balance, almost like they formed a story rather than letters. Amir felt a strange pull inside his chest, urging him to open the box, but he hesitated because he feared what he might find. Still, the curiosity pushing through him grew stronger, and after a moment, he slowly loosened the lid. Before he even lifted the lid fully, he saw a faint shimmer inside the box, like something reflecting light that was not even there. When the lid opened completely, Amir felt his breath pause for a moment. Inside the box lay a small metal object shaped like a coin, yet it was thicker and heavier than any coin he had seen. Its surface was carved with the same flowing symbols, and the metal seemed to glow faintly even in the cold water. Amir turned the piece over and saw a face marked on it, but the figure did not match any known ruler or traveler. The face looked calm, almost peaceful, and its eyes seemed to look back at him with quiet intent. Amir placed the coin back into the box and closed it gently because he felt the object deserved respect. He set the box aside and moved toward another one because he needed to understand if all of them held similar objects. The second box opened easily, revealing several stone pieces polished smooth like river pebbles. These stones were engraved with circles connecting to lines, almost like a map, but not of cities or seas because the pattern felt too symmetrical, too perfect to be natural geography. Amir wondered if he was looking at symbols of a forgotten group, people who left clues behind in different forms. He continued exploring and found more boxes, each holding something unique. One held a long strip of cloth with symbols woven into it, almost like a ceremonial banner. Another box contained small golden shapes that looked like fragments of a broken object. Amir gathered quickly that these items were not random cargo. They were too carefully stored, too symbolic, too precious. It felt like the wagon had been carrying a collection meant for protection or passage to a special place. As Amir moved further into the wagon, he pointed his light toward the far corner where something else caught his attention. Beneath the last row of seats, something faint glowed like a hidden star trapped under the shadows. The glow was soft and pulsing, almost like a heartbeat. Amir froze for a moment because he had never seen anything in the ocean glow like that, except living creatures, and even then nothing glowed in a steady rhythm. He felt a mix of excitement and worry rising inside him. The ocean floor was full of mysteries, but not usually ones that behaved like they had life. Amir moved closer slowly, trying not to disturb the water around him because he wanted to observe the glowing object before touching it. As he approached, he noticed the object was spherical metal, smooth and perfectly shaped with the same flowing symbols wrapping around it. The sphere looked new, almost untouched by the ocean, even though everything around it was covered in rust and dust. Amir hovered inches above it, and felt a warm sensation in the water, like the sphere was producing heat despite being in the cold depths. He reached out with a cautious hand and touched the sphere lightly. A gentle pulse ran through his glove like a small vibration, almost like the sphere acknowledged his touch. Amir pulled his hand back in surprise because he did not expect any reaction at all. For a moment he just watched the sphere, waiting to see if anything else happened. The pulse returned, but this time it felt slower, calmer, as if it invited him to come closer and understand its purpose. The silence inside the wagon deepened around him, and Amir felt the weight of the moment. He knew he had discovered something that did not belong to any known history of the world. The wooden boxes, the preserved objects, the carvings, and now this glowing sphere, all pointed to something ancient, or something hidden, something intentionally placed here far from human sight. Amir felt a mix of awe and responsibility because whatever this was, he had become part of its story. He carefully looked around the wagon again, trying to imagine how it ended up at the bottom of the ocean. The metal frame showed no signs of collision with rock, no indications of violent impact. It was as if the wagon had been placed here, softly lowered down, instead of crashing through the water. The thought made his mind race with questions. Who put it here? Why did they protect these objects? Why was the sphere glowing and responding to his touch? Why him, and why now? Amir thought about returning to the surface to gather better equipment and to calm his spinning thoughts, but something inside urged him to stay a little longer. He wanted to observe the sphere again. He moved closer and reached out once more. The moment his hand touched it, the glow brightened slightly, and the symbols on its surface shifted like they were adjusting or awakening. Amir felt a wave of warmth spreading through his hand, up his arm, and into his chest, but it was not painful. It felt almost comforting, like the sphere recognized him, or sensed his peaceful intention. For the first time Amir felt that he was not alone inside the wagon. The presence was not threatening but felt ancient and calm, almost like a guardian resting under the deep sea waiting for someone worthy to arrive. Amir looked at the sphere with growing wonder, because he knew now that these objects were not ordinary artifacts. They were pieces of a forgotten story, and the sphere was the key that connected everything. The ocean around him stayed silent and still, as if watching him. Amir realized that the next step he took would reveal the deeper truth behind this sunken train wagon. The items he found were not just relics. They were messages, reminders, hints of a past the world had never known. And the sphere was calling him to understand more. His heart beat steadily as he prepared himself, because he knew that whatever happened next would change everything he believed about the sea, about history, and about the hidden secrets that waited beneath the waves. Amir stayed very still inside the silent train wagon while the glowing sphere rested under the seat, because he felt that every movement he made was being watched by something ancient and calm. The water around him felt warmer near the sphere, almost like the small object produced a gentle breath that spread slowly across the cabin. Amir lifted his torch to see the sphere clearly again, and this time he noticed something he had not seen before. The symbols on the sphere were not carved randomly, because they formed a pattern that wrapped around the metal in long flowing curves. The pattern seemed to shift slightly whenever the glow pulsed, as if reacting to the rhythm of the deep ocean. Amir wanted to understand what the sphere was trying to show him, so he reached out with a slow, steady hand. The moment his fingers touched the smooth surface, another warm pulse traveled upward through his glove and into his arm. The warmth was soft and harmless, but deeply strange, because nothing at the bottom of the ocean should feel alive. The symbols brightened for a moment, and then dimmed again, as if adjusting to his presence. Amir took a slow breath through his mask, trying to calm his thoughts, because he knew he was dealing with something far beyond ordinary discovery. As he looked around the wagon, he noticed that the sphere was not the only thing affecting the environment. The wooden boxes near him also seemed to react faintly to the presence of light. The carvings on their surfaces looked more defined than before, almost like the water inside the cabin had shifted in some invisible way. Amir moved toward one of the boxes he had not opened yet, and brushed his hand gently across the lid. The carvings felt warm, the same warmth he felt from the sphere. This connection made him realize that the sphere might not just be an object of light, but a key to understanding everything inside the wagon. He opened the box carefully, and found a long cloth folded neatly inside it. The cloth held symbols woven into the fabric, and the thread shimmered slightly even under the weak beam of his torch. The symbols on the cloth matched the ones on the sphere and the ones carved on the wooden boxes. Amir slowly unfolded the cloth and revealed a larger pattern running across the fabric. At first it looked like random lines and shapes, but then he realized it formed the outline of a large structure, a tower rising above a city he had never seen. The tower on the cloth stood tall with long sweeping lines and a round top, almost like a lighthouse but grander. Around it were shapes that looked like roads, buildings, and pathways arranged in elegant patterns. The city did not resemble any known ancient civilization. It looked advanced, disciplined, and purposeful. Amir stared at the cloth with wide eyes because he felt he had just uncovered a secret history no one had ever written. He ran his fingers lightly over the woven symbols, wondering how old this cloth was and who created it. He folded the cloth again, placed it back into the box, and floated back toward the glowing sphere. The strange warmth coming from the object seemed stronger now. Amir pointed his torch downward to examine the seat under which the sphere rested. He noticed that the metal near the sphere was less rusted than the rest of the wagon. It almost looked polished and untouched. This made him think that the sphere might be protecting anything close to it, including the wooden boxes and the cloth inside them. Perhaps this made it possible for the items to remain preserved for such a long time. Amir reached for the sphere again because he wanted to see if it would react differently now that he had seen the cloth. The moment he touched it, the glow brightened stronger than before, and the water inside the wagon began to shimmer. A soft trembling feeling moved through the cabin, and Amir held the seat rail, preparing himself for anything. The trembling did not feel dangerous. It felt gentle, like a soft call or a memory trying to rise through the silence. Then something unexpected happened. The glow expanded slightly, creating a faint layer of light around the sphere. The light began to move across the floor in slow waves. As the waves reached the walls of the wagon, they reflected back, forming a thin shimmering screen in front of Amir. The screen looked like floating fog, yet it held a clear, bright surface. Amir watched in awe as shapes began to appear on the surface. He realized the sphere was projecting something, a message, or maybe a memory. The first shape that formed was a large city surrounded by a calm sea. The tall tower from the cloth stood in the center, rising proudly above everything else. The streets around it were filled with moving lights, almost like floating lanterns guided by invisible paths. People walked through the city wearing clothing marked with symbols similar to the ones on the boxes. The vision was so clear Amir felt as if he had been transported into another world entirely. Amir watched silently as the scene changed. The sea around the city grew restless and dark clouds formed above the tower. The peaceful lights in the streets dimmed slowly, and the people began to move quickly as if preparing for something. Amir saw groups carrying boxes like the ones inside the wagon and moving toward a train station near the edge of the city. The vision showed them loading these boxes into train wagons that resembled the one Amir was standing inside. It became clear that these objects were important to them. They were placing their history, their knowledge, their symbols inside these wagons as if preparing for a journey or an escape. The vision shifted again, showing giant waves rising above the city as if a massive storm approached. The tall tower flickered with light, then dimmed slowly as darkness covered everything. Amir felt a deep sadness watching the scene because he sensed that the city had fallen long ago, lost under the sea or destroyed by something powerful. The train wagons carrying the precious items looked like the last attempt of the people to save their legacy, hoping someone in the distant future would find them. The glowing screen faded, leaving the cabin dark again except for the soft light of the sphere. Amir floated quietly, trying to process what he had seen. He felt humbled by the vision. He realized he was not simply a diver exploring an abandoned wreck. He had become a witness to a forgotten civilization, a world that no longer existed, a people who trusted the future to carry their story. He looked once more at the sphere and the boxes around him. They were not relics of random history. They were messages left behind for someone patient enough, brave enough, and curious enough to find them. Amir understood that he had been chosen by chance, or maybe by destiny, to uncover the truth of what had been buried under the sea for ages. He knew there was still one more step to take. The sphere had shown him the past, but he sensed it held more he had not yet unlocked. The next moment would decide what secrets remained and whether he was ready to understand them. Amir stayed completely still after the glowing screen faded because the silence inside the sunken train wagon felt heavier than before. He had just witnessed the memory of a city he had never heard of, a place filled with light and people who lived with symbols that carried meaning, and now their story rested at the bottom of the sea waiting to be discovered by someone who would respect it. Amir knew he had seen something rare, something that most explorers only dream of. The warm glow from the sphere continued pulsing softly, as if inviting him to step closer once again. Amir slowly floated toward it, trying to understand what the object wanted to show him next. He reached out his hand and touched the sphere gently. This time the response felt different. Instead of a single warm pulse, a steady flow of warmth moved through his arm into his chest, filling him with a surprising calm. The symbols on the sphere brightened in a continuous glow instead of flickering like before. Amir could sense that the sphere was preparing something important, something that felt like a final message. The water inside the cabin shimmered again, but not as strongly as before. A thin soft brightness surrounded the sphere, forming a second layer of light that slowly expanded outward until it reached Amir's hands. He felt no fear, only curiosity, because the light felt kind, almost guiding him rather than overwhelming him. As the glow spread, the wagon around him became clearer, as if the light was pushing away the deep ocean shadows. Amir looked around and saw that the seats, the walls, and even the wooden boxes held a faint shine now. It looked like the wagon was coming back to life, awakening from a long sleep. The air inside his mask felt warm despite the cold water, and he realized that the sphere was changing something in the environment, not to harm him but to show him a final truth. The light gathered above the sphere, forming a soft cloud. Within it, shapes began to appear once again, but these shapes were not of the past. They showed something happening inside the wagon itself, as if the sphere wanted to explain its purpose. The vision began with the same train wagon traveling on tracks through a tunnel of bright stone. People wearing the same symbol-marked clothing stood around the wagon, placing boxes inside it carefully. Their movements told Amir that these items were more than belongings. They were knowledge of their people, collected and preserved with deep respect. Amir watched as one person lifted the glowing sphere and placed it gently inside the wagon. The sphere in the vision glowed brighter than the one in Amir's hand, as if newly made. The person placed their hand on the sphere, and the symbols lit up, forming patterns around the wagon. Amir now understood that the sphere was not only a container of memory, but also a protector designed to keep the items safe, even beneath the sea. The vision showed the wagon being sealed tightly and transported onto a large platform that hovered above the sea in their world. The purpose was clear. They wanted the wagon to survive whatever disaster approached their city. The scene shifted again, showing a powerful storm rising over the sea and giant waves striking their floating platform. The people stood together, watching the wagon sink slowly into the water, as if sending away a part of themselves for the future. They did not show fear. Instead, they looked hopeful, believing that someone one day would find their message and understand that their civilization once lived with knowledge and harmony. The sphere dimmed as it sank in the vision, and Amir felt a quiet ache inside his chest because he could sense the sadness in their final act and their trust in whoever would find it. The glowing cloud faded slowly until only the small sphere continued pulsing with a gentle warmth. Amir held it in both hands, feeling the energy inside it calming, as if the sphere had completed what it needed to show. The wagon returned to its usual dim surroundings, though the water still carried a peaceful stillness that made Amir feel strangely connected to everything around him. He looked at the sphere, then at the boxes, and then back at the sphere again. He realized the sphere had one last message to give him, not through images but through feeling. Amir pressed the sphere lightly against his chest and closed his eyes. A wave of warmth spread through him again, and he felt a quiet understanding settling in his mind. The sphere was telling him that these items were not meant to be taken away or disturbed. They were meant to remain where they were, safe, hidden, and protected from misuse or misunderstanding. The people who created them had placed them here with purpose, trusting that the ocean would guard them until someone respectful found them. They did not want their knowledge scattered or used wrongly. They only wanted to be remembered. Amir opened his eyes slowly and looked around the wagon one more time. He felt a deep respect for the people who lived long before him, and for the knowledge they had tried to preserve. He knew now that disturbing the wagon or taking any object would betray the trust they placed in the future. Instead he decided he would leave everything exactly as he found it. The story was meant to remain safe under the sea, and only shared through memory, not through removal. He placed the glowing sphere back under the seat gently, and the moment he let go the glow softened into a calm resting light. The symbols dimmed slowly, as if the sphere had returned to sleep. The warmth faded from the cabin, and the wagon became quiet again, filled only with the stillness of the deep ocean. Amir took a slow breath and turned toward the opening where he entered. He took one last look at the wagon, the boxes, the preserved cloth, and the sphere, and felt grateful for the trust the forgotten civilization had given him. He moved through the opening and into the open water, leaving the silent wagon behind. The deeper he swam upward, the darker the cabin became, until it vanished completely into the shadows of the sea. Amir knew he would never forget what he had seen. When he reached the surface and climbed onto his small boat, he looked across the vast water with a calm, steady heart. He understood that some secrets were not meant to be taken but protected, and he would honor that responsibility for the rest of his life.